The observation deck stretched wide and empty like a glass bubble floating in space. Stars scattered across the darkness beyond the windows like tiny diamonds thrown on black cloth. Most beings on the station came here to feel peaceful and small, under the endless sky, but Raksha came here to hide. She moved through the shadows, near the far wall, where the lights stayed dim. Her feet made no sound on the metal floor. Years of training had taught her body to move like smoke and wind. Even now, when she had no pack to hunt with, and no enemies to track, the old skills stayed with her. The alien they called Raksha stood, 7 feet tall with gray fur that caught the starlight. Her face was long like a wolf, but her eyes held the sharp intelligence of something much more dangerous. Scars crossed her arms and shoulders like a map of old battles. The largest scar ran from her left ear down to her jaw, where someone had tried to kill her and failed. She wore the dark blue uniform of a military advisor, but the rank patches had been torn away long ago. Only the faded marks remained where they used to be. Around her neck hung 3 metal discs on a chain. They were old and worn smooth by her fingers. Touching them when she thought no one was looking, the observation deck had become her place over the past 3 years. She came here every night when the day shift ended and most beings went back to their quarters. Here she could watch the stars and remember when she had been something more than a walking reminder of shame. Tonight felt different, though. Tonight, someone else had claimed her space. A human sat in one of the chairs near the center window. He was small compared to her, maybe 6 feet tall, with black hair and dark eyes. His skin was the warm brown color that some humans had. He wore the simple gray clothes of a diplomat and held a datapad in his hands. Papers covered the small table next to him. Raksha stopped moving and watched him from the shadows. In 3 years on this station, no one had ever stayed in the observation deck when she appeared. They always found reasons to leave. Sometimes they ran. Sometimes they walked away quickly while trying to look like they were not afraid. But they always left. This human did not leave. He did not even look at her. She moved closer, keeping to the dark edges of the room. Her nose picked up his scent. Humans always smelled strange to her. Not bad, just different. This one smelled like the soap they used in the diplomatic quarters and something else. Something like the tea plants from the station gardens. The human looked up from his work and glanced around the room. His eyes passed over her hiding spot, but he did not react. He went back to reading his papers. After a few minutes, he stretched his arms and rolled his shoulders like someone who had been sitting too long. Raksha had not moved for 20 minutes. She could stay still for hours if needed. It was part of her training from the old days when she had been a scout for her pack. Something about this human made her curious. Why was he not afraid? Did he not know what she was? Everyone on the station knew her story. She was the Veltar who had been cast out by her own people. Warrior who had lost her honor and her name. The Broken Fang who served the council only because they needed someone who understood war and violence. Most beings thought she was dangerous. They were right. She could kill any 3 of them with her bare hands before they could call for help. But most beings also thought she was a coward. They were wrong about that. The human gathered his papers and put them in a neat pile. He picked up his datapad and stood from his chair. Raksha expected him to leave now. Instead, he walked to a different chair closer to the windows. He sat down again and went back to his work. She could not understand this. Why had he moved closer? To her side of the room? Was he testing her somehow? Was this some kind of diplomatic game? For another hour, they shared the space. The human worked on his papers while the stars turned slowly beyond the windows. Raksha watched him and tried. To solve the puzzle he represented, he was not afraid of her. He was not curious about her. He seemed to simply accept that she existed in the same room. When had anyone last treated her like she was normal? The human finished his work and packed his things. He stood and walked toward the door. As he passed her hiding spot, he paused for just a moment. He did not look at her, but he spoke in a quiet voice. "Good evening." Then he was gone. Raksha stood in the shadows for a long time after he left. Those 2 simple words echoed in her mind. Good evening. Not a challenge or a threat. Or a question. Just a polite greeting like he might give to anyone. She could not remember the last time someone had spoken to her without fear or anger or disgust in their voice. The human had sounded calm and normal, like she was just another being sharing. The observation deck with him, her hand moved to touch the metal discs around her neck. They were warm from her body heat and smooth from years of worried fingers. Each one carried the name of a packed brother who had turned against her. She kept them to remember what she had lost. But tonight they felt different in her hand. Tonight, they felt less heavy. She moved out of the shadows and walked to the window where the human had been sitting. The chair was still warm from his body. She could see his reflection in the glass mixed with the starlight beyond. For just a moment, she tried to imagine what it would be like to sit in this chair every night, to work on papers and watch the stars without hiding in the darkness. The idea scared her more than any enemy she had ever faced, but it also made something wake up in her chest that had been sleeping for 3 long years, something that felt almost like hope. She looked out at the stars and wondered if the human would come back tomorrow night. She wondered if he would speak to her again. She wondered what it would be like to answer him. The observation deck felt different now. It was no longer just her hiding place. It was a room where someone had said good evening to her, like she was worth greeting. She stayed until the night shift ended, and the first lights of the artificial dawn began to glow through the windows. Then she went back to her small quarters and tried to sleep. But her dreams were full of quiet voices and shared spaces, and the strange new feeling that maybe, just maybe, she was not completely alone in the universe anymore. Kim Dae walked through the station corridors with his evening papers tucked under his arm. 5 days had passed since his first night in the observation deck. 5 days since he had spoken to the alien in the shadows. He had returned every night. And she had been there too, watching from her dark corner like a ghost made of fur and starlight. Tonight would be different, though. Tonight he carried something extra in his bag. The observation deck doors slid open with their usual soft hiss. The alien was already there, standing by her window in the far corner. Day had learned her habits over the past few days. Always arrived first and always chose the same spot. She never made noise when she moved, but he could feel her watching him as he worked. He set his papers on the small table and arranged them like he did every night. But instead of sitting down right away, he walked to the food dispenser built into the wall near the entrance. He pressed a few buttons and waited. While the machine hummed and clicked, 2 cups of tea appeared in the dispenser slot. The smell of herbs and flowers filled the air around him. They picked up both cups and walked back toward his usual chair. But this time he did not sit down. Instead, he walked slowly toward the alien's corner. She went very still as he approached. Her yellow eyes tracked his every movement. Her muscles tensed like she was ready to fight or run. But she did not move away from the window. Day stopped about 10 feet from her and held out one of the cups. "It helps with the long nights," he said quietly. For a moment they just looked at each other. The alien's face showed surprise in something. That might have been fear. Not fear of him, but fear of what he was offering. Like she had forgotten how to accept kindness from another being, her hand moved slowly toward the cup. Her fingers were long and ended in short claws that could probably cut through metal. But when she took the tea from him, she was careful not to touch his skin, like she was afraid she might hurt him by accident. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was deep and rough, like she did not use it very often. Day nodded and went back to his chair. He opened his papers and began to read while sipping his tea. The alien stood by her window, holding her cup in both hands. She lifted it to her nose and breathed in the smell. Then she took a small sip. The tea seemed to surprise her. Looked down at the cup and then at Day. He pretended not to notice, but he could see her reflection in his datapad screen. Was almost smiling. They drank their tea in comfortable silence while the stars turned outside the windows. Cargo ships moved between the docking bays like slow fish swimming through dark water. The artificial gravity hummed quietly under their feet. After an hour, Day finished his work and gathered his papers. The alien had moved closer to the center of the room while they sat together, not close enough to talk easily, but close enough that she was no longer hiding in the shadows. "The same time tomorrow?" Day asked as he packed his bag. The alien looked at him with those sharp yellow eyes. She seemed to be thinking about his question very carefully. "Yes," she said finally. "Same time." Day smiled and headed for the door. "Good night, then." "Good night," she replied. The next morning brought bad news to the council chambers. A transport ship carrying families from the border colonies had been attacked by raiders. The ship was damaged and drifting in space with no power. Rescue ships were on the way, but the attackers might come back before help arrived. Day sat in the diplomatic section and watched the council members argue about what to do. The military advisors stood at attention near the front of the room. Most of them were from species that looked like they were born for fighting. Big creatures with thick armor and sharp teeth. But the alien from the observation deck stood apart from the others. She wore the same dark blue uniform, but no one spoke to her. When she tried to step forward to offer advice, the other advisors moved away from her. When she raised her hand to speak, the council members looked right through her like she was not there. Day could see the frustration building in her shoulders. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She knew something important about the attack. He could tell. But no one would listen to her. The session went on for 3 hours. Plans were made and changed and made again. The alien advisor was ignored every time she tried to help. Finally, the council decided to send 2 warships to guard the rescue operation. It was not a bad plan, but Day could tell from the alien's expression that it was not the best plan either. When the session ended, most beings hurried away to their duties. The alien stood alone in the empty chamber for a long time. Her head was down and her shoulders sagged like she was carrying something too heavy for her to bear. That evening, Day arrived at the observation deck early. He had stopped by the station, library, and spent 2 hours reading about Veltar culture and history. What he learned made him angry and sad at the same time. The alien arrived at her usual time, but she looked different tonight. The frustration from the council session had turned into something deeper, something that looked like grief. Day got their tea without asking and brought her cup to her corner. This time, she took it with a small nod of thanks. But when she sipped it, her hand shook slightly. "Rough day?" Day asked gently. The alien looked at him with surprise. No one had asked about her day in years. "They would not listen," she said quietly. "The rescue plan has a flaw. The raiders will expect warships. They will attack from the blind spot behind the transport's engine section. People will die because they would not listen to the broken one." Her voice carried pain that went deeper. Then one bad day. This was the pain of years of being ignored and dismissed and treated like she did not matter. "You are not broken," Day said firmly. The alien stared at him. Her yellow eyes went wide with shock. "You know what I am?" she said. "You know why they cast me out?" "I know some of it," Day admitted. "But I think there is more to your story than what most people believe." They stood together in the starlight, 2 beings from different worlds sharing tea and honest words. Outside the windows, the rescue ships were probably launching toward the damaged transport. Inside the observation deck, something was beginning to grow between a lonely human and an exile, who had forgotten what it felt like to be seen as more than her worst moment. The alien looked down at her tea and then back at Day. "My name was Miraleth once," she whispered, before they took it away. It was the first real thing she had shared with anyone in 3 years. Day understood that she was giving him a gift more precious than gold or weapons or power. She was giving him her trust. Kim Day spent his free time in the station library, searching through files about the Veltar people. The more he read, the more questions he had. Their culture was built around honor and family groups called packs. They had complex rules about names and respect. They created beautiful art and poetry about stars and hunting and the bonds between pack members. Nothing he read matched. The broken creature that everyone on the station feared, the library's main computer held millions of files. From across the galaxy, Day searched through military records and cultural studies and news reports. And most of what he found about Raksha was the same basic story. She had been cast out by her people for bringing shame to her pack. She had lost her honor in battle and been stripped of her true name, but the details never quite made sense to him. Why would a people who valued honor so highly keep someone around who had none? Why would the council hire a military advisor who had failed in battle? And why did she still wear those 3 metal discs around her neck if they were symbols of her shame? Day pushed deeper into the files. He found ship logs and battle reports and personnel records going back 10 years. Slowly, a different picture began to form. 3 years ago, Miraleth had been a scout leader in the Veltar border guard. Her pack was responsible for protecting colony worlds from raiders and pirates. She had a perfect record of successful missions. Her commanders praised her tactical skills and her loyalty to her pack brothers. Then came the incident that changed everything, Distress signal from a mining colony on Kepler 7. Raiders had attacked the settlement and taken hostages. Civilian population was trapped in underground shelters while the attackers demanded ransom from the colonial government. Miraleth's pack was sent to handle the situation. But when they arrived, the pack leader made a terrible decision. Instead of trying to rescue the hostages, he ordered his warriors to destroy the entire settlement. Kill everyone and let the colony government sort out the pieces later. Had refused the order. She broke from her pack and tried to reach the civilian shelters on her own. She managed to evacuate 300 people, mostly children and elderly colonists, before her own pack brothers turned their weapons on her. The official report said she had disobeyed orders and endangered the mission. It said she had shown cowardice in the face of the enemy. It said she had been stripped of her name and rank for bringing dishonor to her people. The official report was a lie. Day found the real story, buried in the personal files of a council investigator who had visited the colony afterward. Camera footage from the settlement's security system, witness statements from the survivors. Medical records showing that Miraleth had been shot 3 times. By her own pack, while carrying children to safety. She had not been cast out for cowardice. She had been cast out for having too much courage. That evening, Day arrived at the observation deck with their usual tea and a head full of angry thoughts. How many beings on this station knew the truth? How many chose to believe the lie because it was easier than admitting they had been wrong about her? Miraleth was already at her window when he arrived. She had been coming earlier each night, he noticed, like she was looking forward to their quiet time together. "You seem troubled tonight," she said as he handed her the tea. Day looked at her scarred face and saw her differently now. Those scars were not marks of failure. They were proof of the price she had paid for doing what was right. "I have been reading about your people," he said carefully. Miraleth went very still. Her yellow eyes watched his face like she was trying to read his thoughts. "What did you learn?" she asked. "I learned that the Veltar have beautiful poetry about the stars," Day said. "Would you share some with me?" She looked surprised by the request. No one had asked her about art or culture in 3 years. They only wanted to know about weapons and tactics and ways to kill enemies. "You really want to hear Veltar poetry?" she asked. "Very much." Miraleth looked out at the stars beyond the window. When she spoke, her voice changed. It became softer and more musical. The harsh edges that came from years of anger and pain smoothed away. When the pack runs under starlight, every paw finds its place on the path. When the hunt calls to the faithful, every heart beats with the same rhythm. But the lone wolf knows different songs, songs that echo in empty spaces, songs that remember what was lost, songs that dream of what might be found. Her voice trailed off into silence. Day could hear the longing in those words, the deep sadness, of someone who had been cut away from everything that gave her life meaning. "That was beautiful," he said quietly. "It is an old verse about belonging," Miraleth said. "My pack mother taught it to me when I was young, before I understood what it meant to be alone." They stood together, sipping their tea while the cargo ships moved through the darkness outside. Day wanted to tell her what he had learned about her real story. He wanted her to know that someone finally understood the truth. But something held him back. Maybe it was not his truth to speak. Maybe she needed to tell him herself when she was ready. "The artificial gravity feels wrong here," Miraleth said suddenly. "Too light. On my homeworld, each step reminds you that you are connected to something solid and real. Here, I feel like I might float away if I am not careful." "Tell me about your world," Day said. 2 moons in the sky. Purple grass that grows tall as a person's waist. mountains with snow that never melts, the pack grounds where the young ones learn to hunt. Her voice grew distant with memory. I had a favorite place by a waterfall where I would sit and think. When the pack was sleeping, the water made music against the rocks. It sounded like the old songs my grandmother sang. Do you miss it? Miraleth looked at him with those sharp eyes. Every day. But home is not just a place. It is the people who know your true name and call you by it with love. I have not had a home for 3 years. The pain in her voice made Day's chest tight with sympathy. This proud warrior who had risked everything to save innocent lives was carrying a burden of loneliness that would have broken most beings. Why do you still wear those? Day asked gently, nodding at the metal discs around her neck. Miraleth touched them with one clawed finger. These are name tokens from my pack brothers, the ones who turned against me. I keep them to remember what I lost. Or maybe, Day said carefully, you keep them to remember who you used to be, before they tried to make you forget. She stared at him for a long moment. Something flickered in her eyes that might have been hope. You see things differently than most beings, she said. Maybe that is what humans are good at, Day replied, seeing people for who they really are, instead of who they are supposed to be. As the night grew later and their tea grew cold, Miraleth shared more pieces of herself. Stories about her training days, memories of successful missions. The pride she had felt serving her people before everything went wrong, and slowly Day began to understand that the alien everyone feared was not the real Miraleth at all. She was a mask worn by someone who had been forced to hide her true self to survive, but masks could be removed. Names could be reclaimed. And sometimes all it took was one person willing to look past the surface and see the heart underneath. The emergency alarm screamed through the station corridors like a wounded animal. Red lights flashed on every wall and ceiling. Gamday ran toward the council chambers along with hundreds of other beings who had been pulled from their sleep by the urgent sound. The main chamber was packed with delegates, military advisors, and station staff. Everyone looked scared and confused. The big display screen at the front showed a star map with several red warning symbols blinking in the outer Rim Territories. Council leader Vexstar stepped up to the speaking platform. His blue skin looked pale under the emergency lights. When he spoke, his voice carried across the chamber through the translation speakers. 3 hours ago, a rogue faction attacked civilian transports in the Kepler system. They destroyed 2 cargo ships and captured a passenger liner with 800 people on board. The attackers are demanding the release of war criminals from our prisons. They have given us 12 hours to respond. Murmurs of fear and anger rippled through the crowd. Day looked around for Miraleth and spotted her standing with the other military advisors near the front. She looked more alert than he had seen her in weeks. Her yellow eyes were focused on the star map like she was already planning a response. Our fleet commanders are preparing to launch a rescue mission, Vexstar continued. But the enemy has chosen their position well. The passenger ship is hidden in an asteroid field near the old mining stations. Any direct attack risks killing the hostages. One of the military advisors stepped forward. Commander Thane was a huge creature from a warrior species known for their aggressive tactics. His voice boomed across the chamber. We should strike fast and hard, Thane declared. Send in battle cruisers with full firepower. Destroy the asteroids if we have to. Better to risk some hostages than let these criminals think they can threaten. The council, several delegates, nodded in agreement. But Day could see Miraleth shake her head slightly. She knew something the others did not. Another advisor suggested using stealth ships to sneak through the asteroid field. A third wanted to negotiate with the attackers and buy more time. Each plan had problems that the speakers did not seem to understand. Miraleth raised her hand to speak. The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then Commander Thane laughed. The Broken One thinks she has wisdom to share, Thane said loudly. The same wisdom that got her cast out by her own people. Cruel laughter echoed through the chamber. Miraleth lowered her hand and stepped back into the shadows. But Day could see the frustration burning in her eyes. She knew how to solve this problem. She had fought similar battles before. But no one would listen to her. The debate went on for 2 more hours. Plans were made and rejected and made again. The rescue deadline grew closer while the council argued about tactics they did not fully understand. Finally, the session ended with a compromise plan that satisfied no one. 3 battle cruisers would approach the asteroid field while stealth scouts tried to locate the exact position of the passenger ship. It was not terrible, but it was not good either. As the chamber emptied, Day watched Miraleth walk away alone. Her shoulders were hunched with the weight of knowing that people would die because of the council's mistakes. But there was nothing she could do to stop it. That evening, Miraleth did not come to the observation deck at her usual time. Day waited for an hour before going to look for her. He found her on one of the lower maintenance levels. Sitting on a cargo crate and staring at nothing, she looked up when he approached but did not speak. Her face showed a sadness deeper than anything he had seen before. "They are going to get those people killed," she said quietly. "What would you do differently?" Day asked. Miraleth was quiet for a long moment. Then she began to speak in the voice of someone who had fought too many battles and seen too much death. "The asteroid field near Kepler 7 has 3 main entry points. The council plans to use the widest one because it looks safest, but that is exactly what the attackers expect. They will have mines and gun positions covering that approach." She stood up and began pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "Is a smaller passage on the far side of the field. It looks dangerous because of the floating rocks and old mining equipment. But a small team could get through without being detected. Find the passenger ship and disable its engines while the main fleet creates a distraction from the other side." Day could hear the tactical brilliance in her plan. But he could also hear something else in her voice. The pain of being ignored when she had the knowledge to save lives. "Why did they really cast you out?" he asked gently. Miraleth stopped pacing and looked at him with those sharp yellow eyes. For a moment he thought she would not answer. She sat back down on the cargo crate and began to speak. 3 years ago, my pack was sent to deal with raiders who had taken hostages on a mining colony. When we arrived, my pack leader ordered us to destroy the entire settlement. Kill everyone and let the government sort out the mess later. Her voice grew quiet and distant as she remembered. There were 300 civilians. In the underground shelters, most of them were children and old people who had nothing to do with the conflict. I could not let them die for the sake of a quick solution. "So you tried to save them?" I broke away from my pack and went into the shelters alone. I carried out as many as I could before my own pack brothers opened fire on me. 3 bullets in the back while I was carrying a child to safety. Miraleth touched the largest scar on her shoulder, the one Day had noticed on their first meeting. Official story says I was a coward who disobeyed orders. The truth is that I saved 300 innocent lives and lost everything that mattered to me. My pack, my name, my place in the world, all gone because I chose to do what was right instead of what was easy. Day felt anger burn in his chest. Not at her, but at the system that had punished her for having courage and compassion. "You are not broken," he said firmly. "You are exactly what a warrior should be.
Ow!
Someone who protects the innocent, even when it costs everything." Looked at him with surprise. It had been 3 years since anyone had seen her actions as heroic instead of shameful. "The council does not see it that way," she said. "Then maybe it is time someone reminded them who you really are." As they sat together in the dim maintenance corridor, surrounded by the hum of station machinery, Day made a decision that would change both their lives. Tomorrow he would stand before the council and tell them the truth about Miraleth. Not the convenient lie they preferred to believe, but the real story of courage and sacrifice. And he would call her by the name she deserved, the name that honored her true heart instead of the shame others had tried to force on her, the name that had been hidden too long in silence and fear. Kim Day stood outside the council chambers holding a data pad filled with evidence and a heart full of determination. Inside, the emergency session was already underway. Reports were coming in from the rescue mission, and they were not good. The battle cruisers had encountered heavy resistance at the main entry point to the asteroid field. Exactly as Miraleth had predicted. 2 ships were damaged, and the stealth scouts had been detected before they could locate the passenger liner. The mission was failing, and 800 hostages were running out of time. Day pushed through the crowd of observers and made his way to the diplomatic section. On the platform at the front of the chamber, Commander Thane was explaining why his plan had not worked. "The enemy was more prepared than our intelligence suggested," Thane said loudly. "They have hidden weapons throughout the asteroid field. We need to bring in heavy assault ships and blast our way through." Several delegates voiced agreement, but Day could see the doubt in their faces. They were scared and desperate, and grasping for any solution that sounded confident. Miraleth stood with the other military advisors, but she might as well have been invisible. No one looked at her or asked for her opinion. She was just part of the background, a reminder of failure that everyone preferred to ignore. Council leader Vexstar was about to call for a vote on Thane's new plan when Day stood up. "I request permission to speak," he called out. The chamber fell quiet. Diplomatic. Observers were allowed to attend council sessions, but they rarely participated in the discussions. Vexstar looked surprised but nodded his permission. Day walked to the speaking platform with his data, pad clutched in his sweating hands. Hundreds of eyes watched him from the crowded chamber. He had never spoken to such a large group before, but the lives of 800 hostages gave him courage. "Honored council members," he began, "I have information that might help resolve this crisis. But first, I need to correct a misunderstanding that has gone on too long." He turned to look directly at Miraleth. She was staring at him with wide, yellow eyes, clearly shocked that he was speaking about her in public. "For 3 years, this council has employed a military advisor known as Raksha. You have treated her as an exile with no honor and no worth. You've ignored her expertise and dismissed her advice. But you have been wrong about who she really is." Murmurs of confusion rippled through the chamber. Commander Thane stepped forward, with anger on his face. "What does this have to do with the hostage crisis?" Thane demanded. "Everything," Day replied. He activated his datapad, and the evidence he had gathered appeared on the main display screen. Ship logs, battle reports, witness statements, and medical records filled the screen in neat columns. 3 years ago, scout leader Miraleth of the Veltar Border Guard was sent to rescue hostages from a mining colony. When her pack leader ordered the massacre of 300 innocent civilians, she refused to obey. She broke from her pack and evacuated the hostages alone, saving every single life at the cost of her own career and reputation. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Delegates who had ignored Miraleth for years suddenly turned to stare at her with new understanding. But Day was not finished. "She was not cast out for cowardice," he continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "She was cast out for having too much courage. She chose to save innocent lives rather than follow orders that would have made her a war criminal. The scars on her body are not marks of failure. They are proof that she took 3 bullets in the back while carrying children to safety." The evidence on the screen was overwhelming. Security footage showed Miraleth carrying civilians through smoke and debris while her own pack brothers fired at her. Medical records documented her injuries. Survivor testimonies praised her heroism and sacrifice. Vexstar looked from the screen to Miraleth and back again. His blue face showed shame and regret. "If this is true," Vexstar said slowly, "then we have done a terrible injustice to one of the most honorable beings ever to serve this council." "It is true," Day said firmly. "And she has the tactical knowledge to save those hostages right now, if you are willing to listen to her." All eyes turned to Miraleth. She stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed by the sudden attention and the revelation of her true story. Then she stepped forward with the confidence of the warrior she had always been. "There is a narrow passage on the far side of the asteroid field," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. "It looks dangerous, but a small team can navigate it without detection. While the main fleet creates a distraction, strike teams can reach the passenger ship from behind and disable its engines before the attackers can react." The plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Several military advisors nodded with approval. Even Commander Thane looked impressed despite his earlier hostility. But Day had one more thing to say. He looked directly at Miraleth and spoke the words that would change her life forever. "I present to this council not Raksha the exile, but Miraleth the Starheart, a warrior who chose honor over orders, Courage over comfort and the lives of innocence over her own future. She deserves to be recognized for who she truly is, not punished for the lies others have told about her. The effect on Miraleth was immediate and profound. Her yellow eyes filled with tears that she tried to blink away. Her proud shoulders straightened as if a great weight had been lifted from them. For the first time in 3 years, someone had spoken her true name with respect and recognition. Miraleth, Vextar said, testing the name on his tongue. Will you help us save those hostages? Yes, she said, and her voice was strong and clear. I will help you save them all. The council voted unanimously to follow her tactical plan. As the chamber emptied and beings rushed to implement the new strategy, Miraleth approached the speaking platform where Day was packing his data pad. Why? She asked quietly. Why did you risk your career to defend me? Day looked at this proud warrior who had endured 3 years of shame and isolation for the crime of having too much honor. Everyone deserves to be seen for who they really are, he said. And because sometimes it takes a human to remind the galaxy that courage and compassion are worth more than politics and convenience. As rescue ships launched toward the asteroid field under Miraleth's tactical guidance, the two friends stood together knowing that something important had changed. The truth had been spoken, a true name had been restored, and 800 hostages would live because someone had finally listened to the warrior it tried so hard to ignore. The Starheart had found her place in the galaxy once again. 1 month after the hostage rescue, Kimday walked through the station corridors and noticed how different everything felt.
Right.
Beings who used to whisper and point now nodded respectfully when they saw him. He had become known as the human who spoke truth to power and changed the fate of a wrongly accused hero. But the biggest change was in his evening companion. Miraleth no longer hid in the shadows of the observation deck. She sat in the center chairs now, comfortable in her own skin for the first time in 3 years. New uniform bore the rank insignia of Senior Military Advisor, a position the council had created especially for her. The metal discs still hung around her neck, but now they seemed less like chains and more like reminders of how far she had come. The rescue mission reports came in today, Miraleth said, as Day joined her with their usual evening tea. All 800 hostages recovered. Safely. No casualties among the rescue teams. Day smiled as he settled into his chair. Her tactical plan had worked perfectly. The narrow passage through the asteroid field had allowed the strike teams to approach undetected, while the main fleet provided distraction. The passenger liner had been secured, and the attackers captured within 4 hours of the new plan's implementation. Commander Thane stopped by my office this afternoon, Miraleth continued. He wanted to apologize for the way he treated me. He also asked if I would help train his tactical teams. What did you tell him? I said yes. Everyone deserves a chance to learn and grow, even stubborn old warriors who are too proud to admit when they are wrong. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the familiar dance of cargo ships and transport vessels outside the windows. The view had not changed, but everything else had. Miraleth was no longer a ghost haunting the edges of station life. She was a respected member of the community with important work to do and colleagues who valued her expertise. The Veltar delegation sent a message yesterday, she said quietly. They want me to return to active duty with the border guard. Full. Rank restored, honor intact, my place in the pack waiting for me. Day felt a stab of sadness at the thought of losing his friend. But he also felt happiness for her. This was what she had dreamed of for 3 years, the chance to go home and reclaim her old life. Will you go? He asked. Miraleth was quiet for a long moment. She sipped her tea and looked out at the stars that had been her companions during the long nights of exile. I thought I would, she said finally. For 3 years, going home was the only thing I wanted. But now I am not sure that is the right choice. Why not? Because I am not the same person who left. It's the experiences I have had here, the friends I have made, the work I do with the council. These things have changed me. I am still Veltar. But I am also something more now, something that did not exist before I was cast out. She turned to look at him with those sharp yellow eyes that had once seemed so fierce and dangerous. Now they just looked wise and sad and hopeful all at the same time. "I have found a new kind of pack here," she said. "Beings from different worlds who judge each other by actions instead of birth or politics, the council staff who bring me reports and ask my advice, the young officers who want to learn tactics, the maintenance workers who nod hello when they see me in the corridors, even the diplomatic observers who share tea and honest conversation." Day understood what she meant. The station had become her home in ways that went deeper than just having a place to sleep. She'd built a life here, relationships that mattered, work that had meaning. "Your old pack cast you out for doing what was right," Day said. "But you have found a new pack that values you for the same reason." "Yes, and I think I would rather stay with beings who chose to accept me than return to ones who only want me back because it is politically convenient," as if summoned by her words. The observation deck doors opened and several familiar faces appeared. Dr. Ewan from the medical bay waved as she settled into a chair with her evening reports. Chief Engineer Kowalski nodded respectfully as he passed through on his way to the night shift. Even Council Leader Vexstar stopped by to discuss the next day's agenda before heading to his quarters. What had once been Miraless's lonely refuge had become a gathering place for the station's night shift workers. Beings came here to relax after long days, to share quiet conversation, to find a moment of peace under the stars. And at the center of it all sat the former exile who had become the heart of their informal community. "I made my decision this morning," Miraleth said. "I sent a message to the Veltar delegation thanking them for the offer but declining to return. I told them I have found my place in the galaxy, and it is here." Day felt relief wash over him. He had not realized how much he had feared losing his friend until she told him she was staying. "What will you do now?" he asked. "The same thing I have always done, protect innocent beings and serve the cause of justice. But now I do it with the support of people who understand what those words really mean." She reached up and touched the metal discs around her neck. For 3 years they had been reminders of loss and failure. Now they were something different. "Used to keep these to remember what I lost," she said. "Now I keep them to remember what I learned. That sometimes you have to lose everything to discover who you really are. And sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the one you were born into." As the evening wore on and the night shift settled into their routines, Day watched his friend interact with the other beings who had come to respect and care for her. She offered tactical advice to a young security officer. She shared stories of her home world with a xenobiologist studying Veltar culture. She listened patiently to complaints from a maintenance worker having trouble with his supervisor. This was what humans were good at, Day realized. Not just seeing people for who they really were, but helping them see it too. Helping them find their place in a galaxy that could be cold and cruel and lonely. "I'll thank you," Miraleth said, as the evening wound down and beings began heading back. To their quarters? For what? For speaking my true name when I had forgotten it myself. For seeing the person I was underneath the shame others tried to force on me. For giving me back my place in the world. Day smiled and finished the last of his tea. That is what friends do. They remind each other who they really are when the world tries to make them forget. As they walked back through the station corridors, together, Day thought about the journey that had brought them both to this point. A lonely human diplomat and an exiled alien warrior had found each other in the darkness between stars. They had shared tea and honest words, and the simple gift of recognition. And in doing so, they had proven that sometimes the most powerful weapon against despair is the courage to see one else's true heart and speak their real name with love. The observation deck lights dimmed as the night cycle began, but the stars outside burned as bright as ever. Somewhere among them, other beings were searching for their place in the galaxy. Other outcasts were learning that exile did not have to mean the end of hope, and in the morning Miraleth would be there to help them find their way home.